A warning before you listen.
What you are about to hear is not meant for children, nor for the faint of heart. This is an unfiltered retelling of ancient myths, told as they were born, raw, violent, unsoftened. Expect scenes of brutality, curses that linger, betrayals that reshape fate, and a hunger for power that shows no mercy. These myths were never meant to lull children to sleep. They were forged in blood, shadow, and fire. So ask yourself, are you ready to hear them as they were first told? Sources and references can be found in the episode description.
In this sonic epic, we bring you the tale of the Titans, firstborn of creation, forgers of tyranny. Prologue. In the beginning there were no kingdoms, no laws, no gods seated upon golden thrones. There was something else, older than time, fouler than fear. Chaos. Not the absence of being, but its unraveling. An eruption not of light, but of hatred. And then, sky met earth, not like a lover meets his beloved, but like a cage slamming shut on a shattered wing. That first embrace was closer to a cosmic assault. And from the womb of that wound, they were born, the Titans, creatures unlike men, unlike gods, born of screams never heard, of pleasure never sought, of curses never forgiven. Each one was a symbol, a name not yet spoken, one for flame, another for memory, one for justice, another for shadows. But they were not born to be kings. They were walls, beneath an earth that had not yet been built, until one among them refused to be a wall. He lifted the sickle. He severed the sky from the earth, and existence bled again. He thought he had ended tyranny, but no one told him, once blood is spilled, it never stops.
From that moment, rule began, not through justice, but through fear, not by hope, but by devouring. This is not a tale of light. It is the tale of how a throne is carved from flesh, how a womb becomes a trench, how lightning is not born to illuminate, but to tear apart all that thought itself eternal. This is the Titan epic, the moment time decided to begin with a betrayal. In this saga, we tell the story of the second generation of creation, beings forged from the union of earth and sky, not to reign, but to prepare the way for a tyrant who would one day devour his own children. From the first sickle to the unseen lightning, from silence to the first shiver of revolt, this is not a story of gods, not of kings, but of those who carried time on their shoulders and were made slaves to it. This is the story of the Titans, born of the beginning, forgers of tyranny, and at the end of this chaos, lightning will be born.
Chapter 1. From the Titans epic, born of the beginning, forgers of tyranny. Ashes of the sky, what remains after Uranus fell? How does a world begin after the sky is torn open? The moment time is born, and chaos begins to burn inside the chests of the Titans. After the heavens quaked above the earth, after Uranus was severed by a merciless stone sickle, after his blood sprayed into oceans, valleys, and mountain peaks, silence fell, but it was not peace. It was a silence of a different kind, like the stillness at a funeral when time halts out of respect for a body that still bleeds. Uranus died in flesh, but remained as a voice without a body, whispering through dreams, screaming from the depths of memory. The sky was no longer a roof, but a phantom, and so the world began again. For the first time, Gaia raised her eyes and found nothing above her. No more sky pressing against her body, no more nightly violation, No more sons shoved into prison by the lust for power. But Gaia did not rejoice. Yes, Uranus was gone, but the blood, hers and his, would not be washed away so easily. She had slit the sky open with her own hands. She had given the sickle to her son. She had watched it all unfold.
And whoever slaughters a lover does not remain the same. Gaia was no longer the mother of the cosmos. She became something more complex, the wound that birthed life, and her silence now was louder than any god of Olympus. In the instant Uranus fell, something unimaginable happened. The earth opened its mouth and released her children. The 12 Titans, sons and daughters of Gaia and Uranus, buried alive within her womb, rose to the surface. Their shoulders touched sunlight for the first time. Their skin, hardened by darkness, burned beneath the newborn sun. But their eyes did not weep. They burned with fury. They were not gods. They were something else, born of accumulated rage and strength denied birth. Now, they had emerged, and in each of them pulsed a fragment of the tyranny they had endured beneath the body of the sky. Cronus, the father-slayer, did not celebrate. He stood now, holding the sickle, dripping with god blood, his siblings around him, his mother behind him. But his face knew no peace. He had realized what no one else yet could. To cut the sky does not mean to own it, and whoever slaughters the father inherits not only the throne, but the curse that sat upon it. Something new had entered the world. Time, not the time we measure in clocks, but a time without beginning, without mercy, without end. Cronus was not lord of light, nor rain, nor love. He became the lord of counting, the endless tolling of seconds. From that moment on, everything was measured. How many days remain? How many children born? How many heartbeats left? When will the throne be overturned? The Titans, born of the forced union between earth and sky, breathed for the first time. But they did not breathe air. They inhaled the ashes of a sky that had been torn above them. Each one of them carried ashes in their heart, shards in their chest, and a question burning behind their eyes. Will this generation fall like the one before? And will one of us become a brother killer like Cronus? The sky was no longer what it had been, but the earth had not yet found rest, and the Titans upon it did not walk like gods, but like heavy shadows still searching for names. This was no clear victory. This was the true beginning of tyranny, because when the first oppressor falls, justice is not born. A void is born, and the void always hungers for its next tyrant. Chapter 2. From the Titans' epic, born of the beginning, forgers of tyranny. The 12 Titans, children of earth and sky. They were born in darkness, buried before their first breath, forgotten as embryos inside a womb with no door. But when Uranus fell and the sky shuddered, they emerged, one by one, not as children, but as boulders rising from the depths. As if the earth had vomited its curses, and now her sons and daughters stood, giants of flesh and iron. The 12 Titans, not gods in the sense we would later come to know, but something more ancient, before crowns, before temples, before prayers. They were symbols of all the wars yet to come. Power, instinct, betrayal, light, borders, memory, sea, justice, blood. Oceanus, the eternal current. The sea hadn't formed yet. There were no oceans, and still, he was born with an unstoppable flow in his veins. He is movement that refuses stillness. Not a warrior, but unstoppable. Oceanus understood before all others. Power isn't always in force, sometimes it's in persistence. He did not clash, he engulfed.
Hyperion. the heavenly flame. From his face came the first light, but it did not warm, it burned. His radiance was not mercy, but a declaration of dominion, a fire that said, "I see all." And that was terrifying. Hyperion didn't carry light, he commanded it. His eyes glowed with an unforgivable brilliance. Coeus, guardian of the Axis. His mind was a meteor, blazing thought and sharp intellect, not wise, but razor-edged. The keeper of the cosmic pole, the master of forbidden questions. Coeus rarely spoke, but when he looked up, time itself seemed to pause. He was the terrifying form of awareness, the kind that knows too much. Creus, lord of reach and limit. His arms stretched beyond the horizon. He didn't understand the center, only extension, the titan of expansion. He detested walls. He longed to spread, to conquer, to spill across everything. But within, he didn't know where he ended, and that made him fragile to those who knew how to bind. He was power without grounding, scattered despite its weight. Iapetus, the first sin. He wore no crown, only a wound, the titan of downfall, the father of sin. From his bloodline would come Prometheus and Atlas, but he himself was a walking question, one no one dared answer. He could not explain himself, yet from his blood sprouted the roots of every future tragedy. Cronus, the son who will overthrow. Not the oldest, but the boldest. He was born holding the shadow of a sickle that had not yet been forged. He didn't look at the sky as a god, but as an obstacle. He asked the forbidden question, "Why not me?" And in his heart, the first rebellion in the history of eternity began to breathe. Theia, the gleam of temptation. Her beauty was unbearable, a face no one could forget, but behind it, a fire unseen. She bore the moon, the sun, and dawn itself, but she was never a gentle mother. She was the eye that mesmerized, then wounded. Theia wasn't mere beauty, she was enchantment, cursed. Mnemosyne, the mother of revolution, the breast that nourished, and the womb that concealed. Wife to Cronus, sister too, but not his shadow. She was something else, the silence that comes before betrayal. She would remain quiet. She would give birth, but behind that silence, a revolution was already being crafted, one no one could yet hear. Themis the justice, without mercy. She carried no sword, only a scale. But her scale did not tremble, did not falter. She was justice that does not plead, does not explain. If she saw injustice, she waited, then struck. Themis was not a queen. She was law incarnate, before law was even written. Mnemosyne, the memory that never forgets. When all others forget, she remembers. She stores every word, every betrayal, every oath, every tear. Not a storyteller, but a warden of memory. She carved every event into her mind, and when the time comes, she will speak the truths long buried, and that will mark the beginning of the end. Phoebe, the prophecy that never sleeps. She was the soft voice of approaching absence, the titaness who inherited the Earth's very awareness. She rarely spoke, but bore light in her silence. Before Zeus was born, she had already passed her essence into the cave of darkness, whispering to the stone, "From this womb, light shall rise." She was right. On the island where lightning was born, her prophecy still waited, watching the skies, preparing to ignite fate. The Well of Waves. She was not just water. She was the source of all flow. From her came rivers, seas, whirlpools, but she was not calm. She was the calm that drowns. She surrounds, she pulls, she vanishes. Tethys was the symbol of feminine force, one that does not explain and never warns. These are the 12 Titans, children of earth and sky, born not from love, but from violent union. They were not made to show mercy, nor to be worshipped. They were the foundation for all power that would come after, and each one of them carries within a sleeping tyrant. The question was never if they would rise, but when, and who would open the door first.
Chapter 3 from the Titans epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny, the Titanesses, thrones hidden behind the walls. In an age of men who swung sickles and claimed the skies, in a world where power roared like beasts in heat, there walked women no one saw, but the ground trembled with every step they took. While the male Titans carved up the heavens, lit fires across the seas, and stretched the world's edges, 6 women stood beneath the weight of stone, holding up the cosmos without a single eye cast their way. They bore no weapons, yet each of them carried a dormant curse, far more lethal than any blade. They were not queens, but the thrones of kings stood on the bones of their silence. They were not worshipped, but through their veins ran the threads with which fate would weave the future's tyranny. These women never fought each other, never quarreled, yet each one left a scar across the skin of time. Theia, the gravity that kills. Theia, the face one never forgets. A Titanius around whom eyes fell before she even spoke. She wasn't beautiful, she was too beautiful, blinding, searing like a sun poured into the shape of a woman. From her body came the sun, the moon, and the dawn, but she wasn't the mother of light, she was the mother of lethal allure. Whoever looked into her eyes didn't see themselves, they saw what they wished to be and never could. Every soul that came near her burned, and she knew, but she never warned. Theia didn't seek to rule, yet she left Titans smoldering in their desire, smiling through the flames. Rhea, the silence that births revolt, sister, then wife, but never once did her heart speak love. Rhea, the woman who slept beside the one who murdered his father and suckled her breast to the one who would devour their children. She wasn't weak nor a helpless lover. She was a soft wall hiding a pit without bottom. In her eyes, no tears, only strategies. In her body, no children, only fates. She never marched to war, but her womb became the first true battlefield in history. Themis, the law that does not forgive. Themis never loved, never bore children, never seduced. She was the unblinking eye, the scale that never begged, the silence that could not be fooled. She wrote law before ink ever touched stone. She didn't stop Cronus from swallowing his young, but she etched his crime on the wall of time and turned the universe's clock into a ticking countdown. Themis did not rebel, nor judge,
but her vengeance moved through time, not blood. Mnemosyne, memory made of stone. Even if all forget, Mnemosyne remembers. She doesn't shout, she doesn't write, she doesn't rule. She remembers every whisper, every betrayal, every desire. She walked the corners of the world, listening to what was never said, seeing what hid behind smiles. From her womb came the muses, the voices that would carry the stories of gods and monsters. Mnemosyne never took revenge. She simply wrote the ending from the very beginning.
Phoebe, the silent prophecy. She never spoke, yet the stones understood her. Phoebe, the Titaness born with eyes that saw what hadn't yet occurred, moved through shadows and whispered to the wind. She once told the darkness, "Light will be born from your womb." And it wasn't metaphor. She saw the lightning before it struck, saw the cradle that would shatter Cronus's reign before it ever rocked. She wasn't a prophet, she was prophecy itself, walking and waiting. Tethys, the spring that does not pardon. Tethys, water flowed from her flesh, the first river fell from her eyes. But she was no gentle stream. She was a source that knew how to drown. She birthed rivers, but never raised them. She unleashed them to wash or to destroy. Tethys did not scream, did not intervene, but when she trembled, no one survived the flood. Behind every titan there walked one of these women unseen, and when Cronus roared into the heavens, he did not rule alone. He ruled upon walls they had built. They were never crowned, yet their fingerprints scorched the bones of time. And when a king falls, it's not always because he's cruel. Sometimes he simply forgot the wall that carried him. And when walls crumble, no throne stands, only rubble. Chapter 4. From the epic, the Titans, children of the beginning and forgers of tyranny, the sons of Iapetus, when sin grew legs and walked. They were not just sons, they were fractures, cracks in the second generation of Titans, splinters of fate that would bleed into the end of their kind. Atlas, Prometheus, Epimetheus, Menoetius, names that did not echo loyalty, but division, between thought and might, between fire and punishment. If you trace the Titan tree, you'll find Iapetus always lingering in the shadows, not screaming, not leading, never crowning himself king, but he was planting. Not flowers, but consequences. He sowed 4 sons into the world, each one a walking rift, each one a prophecy in motion, each one a reason why the Titans would fall, not from the blows of Olympus, but from within. Atlas, the one sentenced to hold the sky. Atlas was never meant to think. He was born to carry, shoulders that did not break, a chest that did not retreat. He was strength, pure, unthinking strength, and that strength was blind, blind to tyranny, blind to the price of loyalty. When the war between Titans and the new gods erupted, Atlas didn't pause, he didn't ask. He stood beside his father and uncles, loyal to the old world, until the end. But his punishment wasn't death, it was eternity. He was condemned to hold the sky upon his back forever, never to fall, never to rest. He is the pillar, keeping the heavens from collapsing back onto the earth, preventing Uranus from mating the ground once more. Atlas wasn't a tyrant, he was a victim of loyalty, and so he remains. The symbol of muscle without question, of force that suffers because it never asked why. Prometheus, the one who stole fire and paid for it. If Atlas was the body, Prometheus was the mind, the son who looked at the gods and dared to ask, must they always rule from above? Is light only for kings? Don't mortals deserve to burn as we do? He saw too much, thought too deeply. Though a Titan's son, he despised the Titan's cruelty. And when he saw Zeus grasp the sky, he did not see a savior, but another tyrant. So he rebelled.
He stole fire, not just warmth, but the symbol of thought, defiance, invention, and hope. He gave it to humans, and with it, he gave them agony. His punishment? To be chained to stone where an eagle devours his liver day after day, only for it to grow back, pain without end. Prometheus wasn't a hero. He was the first crack in obedience, and his fire, the first spark of a future yet to be born. Epimetheus, the one who thought too late. He was the younger brother of Prometheus, but the gap between them was an abyss. Prometheus means forethought. Epimetheus, afterthought. He was kind, simple, naive, and when Pandora, the first woman, came to his door, he welcomed her without question. He opened the box and unleashed everything the world had feared: death, disease, deceit, jealousy, sorrow. He didn't mean harm, but he doomed mankind. His sin, stupidity, and in a world of titans, stupidity is unforgivable. He became the emblem of good intentions that pave the road to hell. Menoetius, the doomed pride. The fourth son, the least known, the most cursed. He was not strong like Atlas, nor wise like Prometheus, nor harmless like Epimetheus. He was something worse: arrogance. He didn't see himself as a son, but as a god, entitled to everything. He looked down on mortals, on his brothers, on the gods themselves. So Zeus struck him. No warning, no trial, just a bolt and ash. Menoetius became the face of sudden downfall, of pride that earns no mercy, of ends that grant no chance to beg. 4 sons, one bore the weight, one questioned, one hesitated, one burned. Each of them tore a piece from the wall of Titan might. They didn't just fall from war. They crumbled from within by their children, their choices, their reflections on what the world should be. And so, the true divide began, between thought and force, between fire and light, between father and son. That was the first whisper of downfall, and it came not from Olympus, but from within the house of the Titans itself, the first voice that dared to say, "We will not obey forever." Chapter 5, from the Titans' epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny. Approaching fire, when desire ignited and never faded. There was no wedding, no music, no sacred bond wrapped around clasped hands. There were only sparks, wild and merciless, flickering in the eyes of 2 beings carved from vengeance. Before anyone dared say wife, before the word vow even existed, everything was already on fire. Rhea didn't walk. She glided, sweeping the earth with a silent, devastating femininity. And Cronus didn't watch. He devoured her with his gaze. Every movement, every breath held too long, every glance half-turned. He consumed it like hunger that refused to end. It was a night that held no holiness, a night before revolutions were born. And what happened then would never be written in the scrolls of love, nor the ledgers of tyrants. Their bodies were still raw from the womb of the earth. The clay hadn't dried. The rage hadn't cooled. And while the Titans looked upward, still drunk on bloodshed and stars, Cronus turned his gaze to her, to the woman who never smiled, but whose silence throbbed with 1,000 unspeakable desires. That night, he didn't call her, and she didn't resist. He stood at the edge of the mountain, staring into the horizon like he owned it. She came to him without a word, stood behind him as if she wanted nothing. but her presence screamed everything. "I am the one who butchered the father," he said. "I split the sky. I made silence my throne. What do you want?" Her voice cut like a scar through bone. "I want nothing. I only wanted to see you, when you have no one left." He stepped closer. He didn't touch her, but the space between them turned into heat, thick, waiting to erupt. She whispered, "Do you know the difference between me and the sky you tore apart? The sky was above you, but I will crawl under your skin without you noticing." He laughed, but it wasn't laughter. It was the growl of a starving beast, one who had never tasted this kind of flame. "Careful, King," she said, her voice now a breath about to burn. "I am not to be consumed. I am fire." She stepped closer, too close. Close enough to scorch the air between them. He didn't command her, but she leaned in, her mouth near his ear, and murmured like thunder, "If you touch me, you won't possess me. You'll be dragged into the depths, like a murderer pulled back into the body of his crime." He understood. She was no woman to have. She was a curse, once awakened, never extinguished. He raised his hand toward her face, but she gripped his fingers before they reached her skin. "Don't touch the flame," she said, "unless you're ready to burn in it. Forever." He smirked. "And what if my fire is stronger?" She replied, "When fire meets fire, either both die, or lightning is born." No vows were spoken. No altar, no stone, no god witnessed it, but the universe paused, as if something forbidden was taking place. Then Rhea vanished into the shadows, like she was never there, and Cronus stood trembling, not from fear, but because something inside him had begun to burn without his consent. From that night on, he never looked at her as a woman. He saw her as an abyss that walked, one that knew where the fall begins. It was not love, not lust. It was an approach to fire, a fire that gives no warning and never repeats itself. And from the womb of that encounter, a storm would be born. Chapter 6. From the Titans' Epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny. The union of Rhea and Cronus, a pact between the blade and the womb. On a moonless night, while the Titans crouched over their trembling bodies and the earth still bled from the wound of Uranus, Cronus stood alone, a silence so dense it felt like the massacre yet to come. The sickle in his hand was still hot, the wind carried the dying scream of a butchered sky. Everything was still, yet time churned inside him like a beast with no skin. He was now a king, not by scrolls, not by prophecy, but by a blade that erased the father's name from the face of the world. Yet sovereignty in the law of Titans was never sealed with steel, but with a woman. A throne does not stand until it is seated, and it does not take root until it touches a womb that knows no mercy. Rhea knew this. She didn't walk toward him as a bride, but as a storm tiptoeing across the bones of the earth. No crown, no veil, no smile, and yet as she passed, the ground itself trembled. Gaia watched her, not as a mother watches a daughter, but as the soil watches a seed it knows will be watered in blood. Rhea passed in silence, but even the air choked on her scent. She was not perfume. She was a warning. Cronus waited, not standing, but seated on a stone carved from blood. No crown, no scepter, only the look of hunger after a feast that failed to satisfy. He spoke with a voice forged of blood and waiting. "It is time for the throne to take root." She answered without blinking. Roots are not planted in air, but in flesh. He took one step closer and whispered, "Did you come to share the crown or to consume it?" She replied, cold dripping from her lips, "I came to give birth to what will consume you." He didn't laugh. He moved in. His breath was rough, his chest rising and falling like a battle that refused to end. "You know who I am," he said. "I know what you'll become," she answered. Their eyes met, not like lovers, but like warriors sealing a pact not in ink, but in skin. That night, no fire was lit, no hymn rose, no lyre played, but their bodies burned. He did not hold her like a woman. He clutched her like a prophecy, one he hoped to smother before it could explode. She did not offer herself like a wife. She gave herself like a map lined with traps, each curve hiding a vengeance too old to name. "You are mine now," he whispered, dragging his hand along her back. "No," she replied, gripping his wrist. "I belong to the hell that will rip from my womb." When their bodies met, there was no warmth, only heat, raw and defiant. A clash of powers, not seeking pleasure, but permanence. The earth quaked, not from tenderness, but from the collision of a merciless king and a woman who bows to none. It was not flesh embracing flesh. It was war, not of the body, but of legacy. He thought he was forging a weapon, but she became the crack in the throne's foundation. He thought he was seeding a womb, but she was planting a curse. And when the breaths quieted and sweat cooled on their brows, there was no love, only a pact. You rule the sky, I carry what will one day bring it down. By morning, Cronus awoke a king, but beside him, Rhea slept without a smile, and inside her, the first bolt of lightning lay dormant, not born to love, but to detonate. From that night on, their marriage was no marriage. It was a crossing between blade and womb, and time began to count its breaths, waiting for the storm to be born.
Chapter 7. From the Titans' epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny. The Wedding Night. A womb that refused the throne. That night, there were no songs in the earth, no cheers from the mountains, not even whispers from the wind. The world had curled in on itself, as if the entire cosmos had turned into a bed. A royal wedding, the wedding of Cronus. The killer who tore the sky was about to be joined by a woman who did not resemble a bride, but the ghost of the first woman, the first sin walking on two legs. Rhea walked the long corridor without scent, without jewels, without tears. She wore something between fabric and nakedness, as if her body conspired with the light to expose everything that could not be spoken. Her hair cascaded down her shoulders like strands of a murdered sun. She did not walk to surrender, but to make the earth crawl toward her. When she stood before the throne, she did not bow, nor bless, nor smile. She looked at him as if to say, "I am not yours, but you will burn in me all the same." He reached for her fingers. They were cold, like the hands of the dead, but her eyes burned with a light that was not life, but warning. "At last you've come," he said. "No," she replied. "I came to watch you break on my bed." It wasn't a night of love. It wasn't a sacred vow. It was the first collision between two empires, a throne that saw the body as a gateway to power, and a womb that saw the throne as a curse meant to be blown apart from within. Inside, everything was dark, except her body. A strange light trembled on her thigh, climbed her neck, and gathered between her breasts like the flash of lightning awaiting detonation. He undressed her, not gently, but like a man tearing open a book of flesh, searching for a prophecy never yet written.
She lifted his chin with her eyes and said, "You're not touching a body, you're signing a prophecy." He moved in to kiss her, like a man sipping from cursed water, knowing the first drop would be a flood. But she stared at the ceiling, not in awe, but counting the cracks from which her soul would soon escape. When he covered her with his body, it wasn't an embrace. It was invasion, a planting of power in a womb that did not welcome, but resisted. Inside her, there was no pleasure, only rupture, only a quiet rage breathing beneath the skin.
When he caught his breath, he said, "Now you are mine."
And she, whispering like poison across his chest, replied, "No, you are inside me now, and you will not leave whole." At midnight she did not scream aloud, but moaned like time itself suffocating. It wasn't pain, it wasn't lust, it was rebellion, born in a womb that had begun to hate. This was the first touch between an era that sought dominion and a woman who knew she could birth the one who would tear it down. And when Cronus slept like a conqueror who had finished his siege, Rhea stayed awake, counting what had not yet been born. She traced a sentence on the wall of silence. He plants no love, he plants a prophecy that will devour him. At dawn, the sun rose without light. Cronus breathed beside her, confident, unaware that the first thunderbolt was forming, not in the sky, but in a womb that no longer believed in his throne. That night was no wedding. It was the night a king slept upon his queen's chest, unaware that her chest had become the blade, her womb the trench, and the body he conquered the very earth that would one day dig his grave. Chapter 8. From the Titans. Epic. Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny. The cry of the newborn when a king smiles too much. It was a morning that didn't look like morning at all. No dawn, no light, just a sky dusted with ash, as if even the sun was too afraid to be born. Silence clung to the walls, a heavy, infected silence. The air sliced into the lungs like a wound that had never been stitched. Rhea was neither asleep nor awake. She hung suspended between a betrayal already done and a cry she did not know whether it would rise from her mouth or from her womb. Her hand lay over her belly, not in comfort, but like one feeling a ticking bomb. The child moved inside her, but it wasn't the gentle pulse of life. It was a warning, as if her womb had become a prison preparing for its own explosion. She whispered in the hollow of her soul, "Who are you? What burns behind your eyes, a flame to guide me, or to burn me alive?" Elsewhere in the palace, Cronus passed like a god dripping monarchy. Each step issued judgment, each glance demanded submission, and each smile pronounced a death. He didn't see the unborn as a child. He saw a signature, another stamp on his decree of tyranny. And Rhea? She watched him in silence. Not the silence of love, but the silence of a mother who knows what stirs within her is not a baby, but a warning, a weapon, a slap in the face of the throne. When the time came, there were no midwives, no candles, no chants or sacred songs, only a womb tearing open and the sound of breath rising from the core of the world, as if the earth itself was in labor. Her body arched, her skin ignited. And then came the scream. It wasn't a woman's cry. It was a rupture in the cosmos, the splitting of a planet, the burst of a vein, death disguised as birth. The girl was born, but Rhea didn't know if she had given life to her or cast her out from hell. She came into the world not as an infant, but as an ember. No innocent cry, just a growl of rage. Rhea held her close and stared into her eyes. There it was, fire, lightning, curses blinking from behind two tiny pupils. She whispered, "Hestia, that is your name, because in your eyes burns a coal bright enough to light what this palace has extinguished." The child latched to her breast. The milk flowed, but it felt like blood. She wasn't nourishing her. She was saying goodbye. Then the door opened. Cronus. He walked not like a father, but like a verdict. He looked at the newborn. He did not see her eyes. He did not hear her breath. He only saw timing. He stepped forward, reached out. Rhea spoke a soundless no, but he did not stop. He took the child as one might take a sword to dismantle it. The baby didn't cry. There was no point. Time had chosen its butcher, and the cradle was already swallowed. Cronus said, "Don't worry, she won't cry for long." And then he left. Rhea remained, bleeding from a place no one could see. She sat there, milk dripping from a chest that no longer remembered how to feed. She was no longer a mother, just a witness to a slaughter that began in the womb and wouldn't end until the throne itself fell. She whispered to herself, "I should have screamed when she was still inside me, but she came out and was slaughtered." And in Rhea's chest, one thought burned like a scar. Kings who smile too much usually kill too much. Outside, Cronus was smiling too much.
Chapter 9. From the Titans' Epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny. The first daughter's slaughter, the first crime, the shock, the end of the dream. On that day, the earth didn't spin. It crawled, heavy, hesitant, as if carrying a coffin on its back, afraid to bury it. The air felt strangled, like every breath had been stolen from a lover's lungs and stuffed into the corpse of a broken vow. Rhea walked the palace, not with the grace of a queen, but with the weight of a woman whose footsteps were made of stone. In her hands, nothing, but her chest leaked milk, and her hips still ached from a birth that hadn't truly ended. With each step she could swear the newborn crawled behind her, reaching, calling, crying. But when she turned, there was only stillness. A stillness thick like a trap, cradled inside what once felt like a home. She hadn't seen Cronus since last night. He vanished after taking the baby in one hand, as if claiming a document, not a soul. And inside her, something still refused to believe. Maybe he held her close. Maybe he kissed her forehead. Maybe he rocked her cradle when she cried. Maybe. But hope cannot erase spilled blood. Then, a sound. It wasn't crying. It wasn't laughter. It wasn't knocking. It was something being cut. Her breath caught. Her body tensed. Her blood recoiled in its veins. She ran. Without thought. She ran because the womb never lies. She ran because something inside her had already screamed, even if no one heard it. When she opened the door, she froze. Cronus stood at the balcony, still, his mouth shut, but he didn't need to speak. His hands were empty, and the cradle was hollow. Rhea did not scream. The scream had died on the way. She stepped forward, looked into his eyes, and found no guilt, only peace. Her voice came not from her lips, but from the depths of her guts. "Where is she?" He turned to the sea and said, "Her voice was too loud. I thought silence suited her better." She staggered back. Something slammed against her heart. Not a slap,
but a blade without edge, a wound that didn't scar the skin, but split time itself. "I gave you a daughter," she gasped, "not a weapon." He responded, as if explaining policy to a foolish senator. "You gave me the start of a prophecy, and I don't believe in prophecies. I bury them," she gasped again, not in sorrow, but like a rib, cracking under the weight of betrayal. She thought she was a queen, but found she was only a womb in a plot. She approached the cradle, touched the blanket. No warmth, no scent, not even a single wrinkle to prove a life had ever been there. "I would have protected her," she said. Cronus chuckled. "Slow, cruel. And I would have betrayed myself if I let you." What followed was not human, not marital, but monstrous. His eyes told her what history had not yet learned. "I don't need children. I need time that cannot threaten me." And then he walked out. Her body collapsed. Milk spilled from her breast. But there was no mouth, no sound, no life. She screamed one final time, but the walls drank every note. She turned to the mirror and saw not a woman, but a tomb for a child not buried, but imprisoned in the gut of her killer. And carved inside her, time etched a single truth. The moment swords begin to smile is the moment mothers are slaughtered. And outside, Cronus was smiling, as if nothing had happened, as if the slaughter of a daughter was just another footnote in the day's rule. Chapter 10, from the Titans' Epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny. The Swallowing Chain, a Requiem Repeated. The first child was only a prelude, a trembling note in a melody destined to repeat 5 times, each with a different hue, each with a breast that didn't nourish, but mourned. Then came the second, Demeter. She arrived like the first drop of rain after a drought, her face blooming with fertility, her eyes whispering the promise of life. Rhea wept as she bore her, because she knew the seed birthed from her womb would never sprout. Still, she named her Demeter and whispered against her newborn skin, "You make me bloom again, even if only for a moment." But as the child reached her breast, the door slammed. Cronus entered, and with a single motion the green was swallowed by the stone, and the promise became a past that could never return. The third, Hera, a storm, even in the womb. Rhea screamed like never before, for this one came not to be born, but to claim. She named her Hera, a queen not yet crowned, and when she held her, it felt like cradling a throne, not a child. But the throne was snatched, the glory devoured, and Cronus, he saw not a daughter, but another number in his butcher's tally. Then came the fourth, Hades. A child who did not cry but opened his eyes, and they looked like tombs. His skin was not human. It looked as if earth itself had kissed flesh. His breath came not from life, but from whatever lay behind its veil. Rhea trembled, yet she loved him. He did not seek milk. He demanded a promise. She looked at him, her eyes shattered. "I'll name you Hades, for you will not dissolve in death. You will dwell within it." When Cronus entered, he found no baby, only a shadow, so he swallowed the shadow, and the void fed the void. The fifth, Poseidon. He wasn't born, he erupted. A storm entered the womb and came out screaming, "I am the sea!" He was born howling, water bursting from his mouth instead of tears, as if a whale had birthed him, not a woman. Rhea gasped. "This is not my son. This is the ocean when angered." She held him. But storms aren't held, and floods do not hush. Cronus came, swallowed the storm, and thought the calm had returned. 5 times, 5 stabs in the same breast, 5 funerals without caskets, without graves, without memory. Rhea no longer screamed. Screams had lost their meaning. She did not cry. Tears betray eyes that have betrayed the heart. She counted. She remembered. She carved names into the walls of her womb, etched a map of the future in the ink of dread. On the 6th night, the milk dried, and the womb became a crypt, not to surrender the dead, but to keep them. There was no more room for hope, no plan for salvation. Only one desire remained. Let the next one not be devoured. And so, when it was time for Zeus, Rhea wasn't preparing for a birth. She was summoning the final storm. Chapter 11 from the Titans' epic, Origins of Power and Makers of Tyranny, the seed of rebellion, when a mother turns to the roots. It wasn't night. It was a funeral without a coffin, and in the palace, not a flicker of light remained. Not because the sun had set, but because Rhea had gone dark. She stood alone in the heart of the chamber that had swallowed all her children, searching for shadows on the walls, some echo of breath, some memory of a cry. Nothing. No sound, no trace, only walls that remember and a woman being forgotten. She dropped to her knees, not as a queen, but as a body gutted from within, left with nothing but skin stretched over memory. Her belly was still, then trembled. Her hand didn't touch it. It hovered, afraid of what she might feel, a new heartbeat. Not a sign of hope, but a warning that fate was repeating itself. Yes, she was pregnant, but there was no smile, only a gasp, like someone realizing they were marked for slaughter. Again. "No!" Her scream didn't come from her mouth. It erupted from her bones. It was coming, and Cronus would show no mercy. He wouldn't even let it cry. This child would not be born just to be devoured. She rose, not with her legs, but as if the womb itself pushed her up, as if something older than time, older than love, moved through her and whispered, "Now." She didn't take shoes, didn't ask permission. She left the palace the way souls leave bodies after the final stab. She walked alone, down a path she didn't know, but knew she had to follow. The forest was silent, the wind shook, every stone beneath her held a history, every branch above her a threat. But Rhea didn't stop. She was going to the roots, to the beginning, to those who came before tyranny. She stood before the cave, the one only visible to women, broken by birth. She pressed her hand to its stone wall, and it shuddered. The earth opened its mouth, but it didn't swallow her. It welcomed her. And in the depths, in the place where clay still remembers how everything was shaped, Gaia appeared. She didn't look like a goddess. She looked like the earth when it's furious. Her body carved with earthquakes, her eyes unblinking. She stood before Rhea as though she'd been waiting for her since the beginning. Rhea didn't kneel. She spoke. "Did you not see what Cronus has done? My 5 children. He swallowed them like hatred takes hold. And now I carry the 6th. I don't know who he is or what he'll become, but I know what Cronus will do when he comes out." She didn't cry. She gasped. "I won't let him be the last piece of my heart to be slaughtered. I won't be just another womb in a butcher's chain. Show me how to save him." Gaia said nothing, but the earth shook, and from the shadows of the cave a voice came, Not a voice, but air speaking. Uranus. He didn't descend from the sky. He appeared as a shadow on the stone walls. He didn't touch her, didn't bless her, didn't promise her anything. He said, "Those who devour their children do not fear love, they fear prophecy." Then silence, but his voice lingered, echoing through stone and soul. Gaia stepped forward, placed her hand on Rhea's belly, and said, "This one inside you is not born to be raised. He must be hidden, raised, to detonate. Deceive him. Let him swallow a stone, not a sun. And this cave you enter today, make it the cradle of thunder. Let the heart of the mountain become a womb the tyrant cannot see." Rhea closed her eyes, didn't speak, but when she opened them again, she was no longer the same woman. She left the cave like a conspiracy emerging from silence. She wasn't returning to the palace. She was walking into a war no one else could see. And from that night forward, Rhea was no longer a victim. She had become the mother of prophecy.
Chapter 12. From the Titans' epic born of the beginning and Makers of Tyranny, the deception. When a mother nurses stone and hides lightning in Crete. That night no one in the palace was awake, but the earth itself was trembling. The wind did not scream, but it panted behind the windows like something that knew something unnatural was happening inside. Rhea was there, alone, curled into herself as if praying to something that had not yet been born. Her womb was at war with her. It twisted violently, as if the child inside wasn't made of flesh and blood, but of untamed lightning. Sweat streamed from her like water from a collapsing wall. Milk leaked before its time, and blood wrote on her legs a script only a woman who had lost 5 children could understand. It wasn't labor, it was punishment. The child wasn't being born, he was tearing himself out, as if the womb had turned from a sanctuary into a prison. And then he came. Zeus. He did not cry. He opened his eyes from the very first breath, as if he already knew everything. He didn't look at her breast, but at the ceiling, as if inspecting the clouds. Rhea did not smile. She gasped. She felt death approaching, not for her, but for him.
"They'll devour him," she whispered, as if she could already hear Cronus's footsteps echoing down the halls. She rose, bleeding, as if her blood itself was paving the way to salvation. She wore nothing but silence, and slipped out of the room like someone committing a sacred crime. In her arms, a child who did not cry, but pulsed like a bomb. She left the palace. No goodbyes, no map, just feet that walked and a heart that knew where they must go. Crete. The path to it was not a path, it was a curse. Thorns, mountains, forests that opened their mouths but didn't swallow her. She walked, dripping milk, blood, and sweat, as if her body was inscribing a prophecy no one would read. She arrived, and in the island's heart, she found the mountain. It wasn't tall, but it seemed to stare the sky in the eye, and at its heart, a cave. Not just a cave, but a womb that would not betray. She entered and laid down the child. She didn't kiss him, didn't whisper words. She covered him with her robe, breathed upon him, and pleaded with the nameless powers to watch over him. Then came Amalthea, the horned she-goat with her swollen udder. She did not ask, she did not fear. She simply stood beside Zeus, like nature itself choosing its ally. Then came the priestesses, the shadow women. Not mothers of flesh, but nurses of myth. They did not touch the child. They circled him like offerings orbiting altars of vengeance. One whispered his name to the stones. Another anointed his brow with drops drawn from the sweat of the wind. A third placed a tiny spear beneath his head and said, "Sleep, but do not sleep." Some called them nymphs, others priestesses of the shadow, but none dared deny their role. They were the first to cradle the lightning. They came to the child, they looked at Rhea, and somehow they knew what must be done. Rhea said nothing. She stood for a moment, then whispered to him, "They won't find you here, and if they do, let the end come upon their corpses." She left the cave, like someone burying her own heart and returning to finish the funeral. She gathered a large stone from the cave's mouth, smashed her forehead against it until it bled, wrapped it in Zeus's cloth, and nursed it with her own milk. And from it, she made a false sun. She returned to the palace, staggering like a shadow stripped of its light. As she stepped inside, silence cracked. Cronus was coming. She heard his footsteps like the tolling of a final bell. He entered the room, didn't look at her, didn't ask, didn't smile. He spoke, cold and flat. "Where is he?" She lifted her arms and offered him the lie, as one offers sacrifices to a starving god. He took the stone, stared at it for a moment, and swallowed it. He didn't question, he didn't doubt, for tyrants never recognize deception when it comes from the womb of a woman. Rhea bowed, not in submission, but to hide a laugh that nearly escaped her veins, a laugh that said one thing only: the lightning was never swallowed. Epilogue. From the Epic of the Titans, origins of power and makers of tyranny, the pulse before the blast, when silence is born a lie, and lightning laughs beneath the throne. Time did not pause out of reverence, it simply choked on what it witnessed. The earth held its breath, the sky shut its eyes, and nothing fell. Yet, everything stood still, yet everything decayed. Cronus, lord of the massacre, paced the palace floors as though nothing had changed. Draped in regal robes, he smiled the way butchers smile after a feast, unaware that beneath his feet a hairline crack had begun to grow, a fault no ear could hear. Because lightning does not declare itself through noise, but through waiting. Inside his chest, a heart. Inside that heart, a stone. And inside that stone, a pulse, a beat that was never his. It belonged to the one he didn't consume, the one who survived, the one now breathing inside a distant cave, in silence that shakes the bones of fate. The halls were quiet, abandoned, but Rhea moved through them, not like a ghost, but like a truth too heavy for history to carry. She didn't search for her daughters, she didn't cry by empty cradles. She simply walked the way a prophecy walks before it becomes a scream. She held no sword, raised no banner, only cast her gaze upon the walls and whispered, "You saw and did nothing." Then she vanished, not into nothingness, but into certainty. For she had planted enough, and what's planted in stolen milk, wasted blood, and curses left unsaid, cannot be unmade. Are the Titans asleep? Yes, but they do not dream. For to dream is to believe in a tomorrow, and those who slaughter their own children have none. Each lies atop a bed of shame, mistaking stillness for dominion, not knowing their rot has already begun. High atop the mountain, Cronus drank. The wine was chilled, the air was calm. Everything beneath him seemed in order, but what he swallowed was not, for the lie he consumed had not digested. And lightning, when caged too long, doesn't fade. It ferments. He looked to the sunset and said, "It's over." But deep within the mountain, something whispered, not in words, but in vengeance. "No, it's only begun." In that cave, there were no lullabies, no cradle, no celebration, only breath. One breath, but enough to ignite the world. The newborn didn't cry, didn't sob. He exhaled, smoke, as if his chest had already accepted the fact. Love was late, and light would never come from another. His tiny body trembled, not from cold, but from hunger, a hunger for something unnamed. His eyes were open, but he saw nothing, only the walls, and the walls learned fear. If you lean in close, you won't hear a wail, only a hush, the sound fire makes when it's being born. And somewhere far off, a question rises from the ashes of obedience. What if vengeance was born in a body this small? What if hatred was raised in a womb that refused to forgive? What if lightning was an infant and grew? The sky has not cracked open yet, but it trembles, and the storms are stirring in their sleep, because the gods did not make this child. Betrayal did. And just when Cronus thought all was still, he felt it. Not a sound, but a sensation. Like a smirk of lightning behind his eyes. "I'm coming," it said. And from that moment, time began counting again, not toward rebirth, but toward a reckoning. And in the final moment of this tale, no curtain falls, only a door that will open again, to a God who does not forgive. His name is Zeus. And when he rises, he will not seek glory, he will seek vengeance.
This chapter of the epic has come to an end, but remember, what you've just heard is not a record of facts, but the echo of a myth, a story born from the imagination of the ancients, etched into the long memory of humankind. If this tale stirred something in you, if it opened a door to reflection or wonder, don't forget to support the channel and share the journey with those you love. And in the comments, tell us, which moment in this chapter struck you the most and why? We'll meet again in the next chapter of this audio odyssey through time. Until then, farewell.